having some camera issues. Anyway, Modern Mystic has made another stupid video. So this is my second try to reply, unfortunately. So he made a video in response to Mariana and hoarding, saying the only liability of the rich is hoarding, which is not really true. The real liability of the rich is the preposterous spending they conduct, the traveling, the parties, the manicured this, the manicured that, the Lamborghinis, the yachts. All these things are hugely labor intensive, wasting human resources on things that are a waste of human resources. Tons of hours for the pleasure of 2 or 3 people, when people should be working, doing infrastructure, building Hoover dams, doing all kinds of good productive things. That's the liability of the rich. It's go back to the king. What was the liability of the king? Oh yeah, the king was hugely expensive, had to have huge mansions, huge infrastructure costs for his existence, plus he owned everything and rented it to everybody else, which meant that everybody was essentially paying usury. Right, that's the other liability of the rich, is that they lend money at profit, and that profit has to be paid out of labor, and so it's a waste of human labor to indulge them in their wealth acquisition. That costs people money. It has to come out of their working life. They have to go to work to produce the wealth digits that the wealthy hold on to. So that's the liability. You want to live under monarchy? That's your choice. I personally don't, and you know, viva la revolution. And if you're on the wrong side of the revolution, well, you know, happy guillotine. Anyway, so this was an idiotic response to that accusation anyway. And what he does in this video is talk about QE, and he's so Mariana. Why don't you explain? Well, you're probably not going to respond either. You know, neither one of you have any integrity. All right, so he says here that the Federal Reserve basically could take the money out as some kind of digits. And why don't you want to explain to the mystic that money never leaves the Federal Reserve in any other form but cash? It never leaves a Federal Reserve account. Money never goes to a bank from a Federal Reserve account in any other form but cash money. Dollar bills, $100 bills, cash bills. That's where you start printing the money. That's how the Fed controls how much money is in circulation, is how much money goes out of the reserve accounts. Duh. And so he doesn't seem to understand that. So why don't you explain that to him? Then why don't you explain to him that the money in the reserve accounts really isn't the bank's money. It's already been spent. The banks can't take the money out and just say, give us $4 trillion in cash, please. We'd like to go buy some equities in the stock market. Because we know that that money in the reserve accounts is money put there to back up the creation of bank digits that have already bought $4 trillion in assets. The money's already been spent. It can't be spent twice, especially on stocks. That wouldn't make too much sense. So the only way the reserve money gets out of those reserve accounts is money has to come into the fucking Federal Reserve. That means those equities have to be sold and the digits go back to the bank, or else you have to put cash in to erase those digits. There's no other way. Cash either comes into the Federal Reserve and they erase the digits with the cash, or they erase the digits because the liability that exists, the money that those Federal Reserve digits are backing up, that is the bank digits, are erased because they sell one of the stocks or the bonds or the other pieces of shit that the government bought. And when they sell it, the bank digits go back to the bank and they erase it on the reserve account. Right? Isn't that how it works? So why don't you explain it to this fucktard? Because he's talking like he knows what he's talking about, and he obviously doesn't know shit. Yeah, and he's obviously listening to people who don't know shit. So yeah, let's back up a little bit, because there's this three choicey thing.
The banks can lend the money to...
Yes, well, they could lend it when they had $30 billion in reserves. As we already found out, the reserves are only need to be 3% of liabilities. So the reserve numbers don't have to be very high, and the banks can lend money. So they don't have any problem lending money. They could lend it if they wanted to. Even under the old standards, they had excessive reserves. So even before the Fed threw $4 trillion into that account, the banks already had excessive reserves, which means they already had a free ability to lend money anytime they wanted to, because they had more reserves than the 3% or 5%, whatever the number is, that they needed to have as a minimum in the reserve accounts. So they were already covered on those reserves. Lending has absolutely nothing to do with this. They had the ability to lend before the $4 trillion was injected.
The clients. And I go, right. Number 2.
Yeah, well, if you go right, you're wrong.
They can buy assets with it. Like,
crazy. They can't buy anything with it. They've already spent it. The reserve account money is directly related to the already happened purchases of equities off the stock market.
treasuries and equities. And I go, right.
Right, well, because you're an idiot. They can't spend the money twice. The banks can't take the money out as cash and then spend cash to buy equities. They can't do that.
What's number 3? Number 3, leave it with the Fed and get 0.25% interest. And I go, okay, that's cool. Over in Europe, he says, then, they've got 2 choices.
Yeah, jeez. See, he's doing this silly voice thing. And when you're wrong, it makes the silly voice thing even really fail. I mean, this is real jump the shark material.
They can lend it out to the clients or buy assets with it.
They already bought assets with it.
Treasuries, equities, commodities, if they wanted to. All the same.
They can't withdraw the money. It's already been spent. It technically isn't the bank's money. The money is directly, the money in the reserve accounts, it directly correlates to equities already purchased. There are equities that have those reserve digits on them. That's the fact of it. And when those are sold, the reserve money will be deducted from the reserve account.
But obviously, because the deposit rate's negative in Europe, Jim Paplava decided that they wouldn't do that. So there were only 2 choices for the bank in Europe, but 3 in the United States. But one of them, the first choice on both occasions, is not a choice at all. Because banks cannot lend their reserves to people, to clients.
Yeah, well, the truth is that if they have excess reserves when they don't have a contract with the Fed, okay, when they have normal reserve accounts, which is reserves are held as security, as insurance, okay, against runs on the bank. That's what it's there for. That's what those reserve accounts were created for, and to create efficient exchanges between banks. So that's the new Fed policy. But the reserve money that's in there now was put in there by the Fed. The banks didn't put those digits in the reserve accounts. The Fed put those digits in the reserve accounts to back up their request to the banks to buy equity with their banker digits.
They can't do it. So, in the United States, there are 2 choices.
And so he says they can't lend reserves. Of course, they can't lend reserves until they convert them into cash. But they could at any time when they have excessive reserves, they just request to the Fed to give them the cash represented in the reserve account. The Fed deducts that amount from the reserve account and gives the bank the cash. They could request the cash if these were normal excessive reserves. They're obviously not normal excessive reserves. They're excessive reserves put there by the Fed, not by the banks.
And in Europe, there's 1 choice. Yeah? it's accounting. That's the way it goes. So in the United States, they can leave the...
Yeah, well, it's not the way it goes. You've got it wrong, so you're just talking shit.
reserves with the Fed, or they can use the reserves to buy equities, treasuries, commodities.
Now, Marianne, why don't you explain it to this man, okay, that they can't do that. They've already spent the money.
Stuff. In Europe, they can buy equities, treasuries.
They can't do that because they've already spent the money.
Or commodities. No choice. Okay. So this is why the stock market's going up. And
no, it's going up because they continue to buy. But once they stop buying, then the stock market's not going to go up anymore. And eventually they're going to have to sell. Okay, and when they start selling, the stock market's going down for sure. Like a rock.
Jim came out with a really good thing, which was, and I was glad I listened to this. I knew I was going to do a video on share buybacks, but it's a bit technical and it'll probably bore you senseless. But share buybacks apparently has gone to such an extent that since 2008, in the United States...
Yeah, just understand, 2008 is when the stock market crashed and the banks had to be bailed out. And they had to be bailed out is because most of the equities they had were crap. Absolute crap. And so they had to get rid of those crap equities or else somebody was going to have to go bankrupt. Nobody wanted to go bankrupt, so they had to somehow make that paper viable. And so they had a system with the federal government where the FDIC insured a bunch of the crap. Okay, so now they have $7 trillion of assets insured by a $30 billion fund, which doesn't sound very solvent to me.
United States, there are the stock of equities is now diminished by 1/3.
There you go. So since 2008, 1/3 of the equities of the stock market have been bought off the market, essentially. They've been purchased, not by usual purchasers. So they've been extracted by corporations through buyback programs, as he states, essentially saying, okay, they instead of giving dividends or some other thing with their profits, they use their profits to buy their own stock. It's kind of a desperation move, often. And what would why would they be doing that? Oh, they'd be doing that because they know the Fed is going to buy $4 trillion worth of stock off the market, and that their stock is now going to go up. So again, they're just riding the bubble. So again, when QE stops, when the Fed stops buying stuff off the market, where's the up potential? The only reason why the corporations have bought their own stock is likely because they know it can't go down when the fucking Fed is buying. And they're going to know once that buying stops that it can go down. And they're going to be stuck with something they bought high and they're going to have to sell it low.
There's 1/3 less that is on the market to be available to be purchased. 1/3 less. Because the companies themselves have been buying back their own stock.
And the Fed has bought $4 trillion worth of equities. $4 trillion worth of things that were held by rich people. Okay, they gave rich people digits, bank digits, that they can now spend on other equities, other stocks. They gave them $4 trillion to spend to bid up the market. And why, again, did the Fed decide to do this? Well, this seems like the only thing to do is to save the rich, stop them from going bankrupt. That's what they do, right? Their interest is preserve the monarchy. The monarch's bankrupt, don't let the monarch go bankrupt. But can it be avoided? Will this work? Buy your own debt? Does this really work? Oh, let's pretend we don't have it. We'll just buy it with fake money? No, I don't think so.
Sale and demand, price goes up because there's less there to buy.
I mean, understand, if the banks took the money out of the reserve accounts, they take the money out as cash. That would mean there'd be more cash in circulation. So understand, there's only $1 trillion of cash in the world right now, out of the Fed. There's only $1 trillion in cash money available to the world. $1 trillion. And the Fed, in 1 year alone, has bought, okay, well in 2 years, has bought $4 trillion worth of stock. So obviously if that $4 trillion went, if the banks requested the money in the reserve accounts because they wanted to buy equities with the money, okay, that's already been spent, but let's say they could, that would mean you would be quadrupling the amount of cash in circulation, automatically creating huge inflation.
Clever stuff, isn't it? So,
man, you're just so far fucking off that you shouldn't even go near that word clever, because you are exactly the opposite of clever here.
Banks having the QE money, or the people having the...
They don't have it. They spent it. They have spent it.
Banks, QE money, depending which way you want to look at it, and the share buybacks, it's damn good reasoning why the stock markets are going up. Right.
Right, and somehow this is real economics. Somehow this is the way the system works. This isn't completely aberrant from how the system has worked. It's not completely upside down logically. It absolutely makes no sense. There's absolutely no way to undo this, right? There's no way to undo this. You can't get out of this Chinese finger trap. Okay? This is just saying, let's prolong it. Let's keep it alive long enough for us to suck the blood out of it. So the people who are in the know basically are going to sucker the market. Okay? They're going to bail out, and they're going to bail out hard. All right? Okay? High. They're going to bail out hard. And the banks are probably in on it all the way. I mean, they've probably unloaded a ton of crap, that they had no hope of getting rid of in the real market for any kind of price. And they're playing this digit game, but eventually they're going to want to play the cash game.
Getting on to...
I mean, understand also, from the statistics I've heard, the $4 trillion represents more money than the 3 biggest banks in the world hold as assets, as corporations. So just understand, this is a lot of fucking money.
That was kind of business, but now we'll go business and people. And hoarding for Mariana.
Okay, well, there's no point in doing the hoarding thing, because hoarding is not the hoarding is not the problem. Inflation is the problem, and inflation created by interest demands is the problem. That's the liability of the rich, is usury and waste. Hoarding gold, yes, that's also a problem. Hoarding commodities will be a problem. Obviously, we pay more for energy because of speculators than we would have if the speculators weren't in the market. So that kind of purchasing power does inflate us out of the capacity to get a fair price. So we can't get a fair price for energy, and we can't get a fair price for gold, and to some extent we can't get a fair price for soybeans, corn, and wheat because, yes, rich people inflate those prices. So that's a kind of hoarding. But that's a minor problem compared to the other waste they create. Well, it's not really minor. I mean, it's another. I mean, inflation is another. When wages aren't going up to meet inflation, inflation is highly destructive to the working man's lifestyle, and that's why in the last 40 years, living standards have been cut in half for working people. And rich people have gotten twice as rich. And it's just quite obvious what's happened is ownership is migrated into the hands of these greedy bastards, and they're doing nothing of socially constructive value. And you people are just sell-out, losing, stupid, idiotic morons to buy into this crap. Fuck. I mean, it makes me want to just sell short. It makes me want to, I mean, I wish it was illegal for me just to open up a shop and sell you suckers some Google stock. Yeah. Fuck. Anyway, till next time. Such stupid video. Very, very bad. Bad, Mystic. Bad. 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 You don't understand how the system works. Money doesn't leave the Fed in any other form but cash. The Fed either erases it or it sends it away as cash. That's it. Nothing else. Either just erases it or it goes out as cash. That's it.